Whenever people talk about No Man's Sky, one subject always comes to mind, and that is missing features. While the game has received huge updates since its beginnings, there is still so much out there that the fans are dying to see. From stuff promised that never got delivered to simple quality of life improvements, today we'll go over 10 more features players are dying to see in No Man's Sky. Just like the previous list, this one is in no particular order. Some of the points brought up throughout this video might make it in time for the next update, some might not, but no matter what, these are 10 more features players are dying to see in No Man's Sky. So the first point on the list is something that I wanted to put in the previous video. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, hence the reason why I'll talk about it now. Back at E3 2014, a much more different type of creature interaction was shown compared to what we currently have in the final product. There was a very cinematic scene being presented that made it appear as if there's an advanced animal behavior in the game. Unfortunately, that was not the case, and No Man's Sky got heavily criticized to the point of even being ridiculed for how bad creature behavior turned out to be. There are 4 major problems that I was able to identify, and those are bad procedural models, very simplistic AI, lack of interaction with the environment, and the sound, and especially the sound. So I'm going to start off with the procedurally created models, which I think is probably the biggest issue of them all. While it's true that sometimes you can encounter some very good looking creatures, for the most part the game just throws at you some weird amalgamation of body parts that try to look like functioning beings, but for the most part they don't really make any sense. Many times the procedural generation for the creature models make no sense to the point it looks rather ridiculous. The AI doesn't help here either, since it's extremely basic and downright bad. There is no herd behavior in the game like we were made to believe in the old trailers. The creatures don't really react to the environment in no way or form. Mostly it's either predators or prey, where predators attack literally everything in sight, including the player. Meanwhile, literally every other type of creature runs away in fear from you, unless of course you bribe them with something. Interaction with the environment is also close to non-existent. Huge creatures don't stomp the ground and don't move trees and foliage in their path like shown in the trailers, and the worst offender of them all is the dreadful sound. The sound effects are so annoying. I think somehow only one sound type is used for literally every single alien creature out there. It's okay for the first few times, but it gets very old and very annoying very fast. At times I'm not really sure if they're even supposed to sound like creatures, or is it just screeches that are there to annoy you. Nonetheless, it's probably one of the worst sounds that I have heard in any video game whatsoever, so I really hope that Hello Games does something in this regard, especially the sound and the procedural generation of the models. It can get downright ridiculous at times and it makes absolutely no sense. So probably one of the top points on the list that really needs fixing. I hope that Hello Games addresses this within the next update. Second on the list is roaming sentinels. Since we're still on the subject of creatures, I'm also briefly going to talk about the sentinels. These are supposed to be the fixers in the universe of No Man's Sky. Whenever they find a glitch or an anomaly in the simulation, their main purpose is to immediately neutralize it. I'll completely leave aside how easy it is to deal with them, as they possess absolutely no threat, but I will talk about their presence on planets and the models that spawn. So far, only the small flying drones will ever randomly scout the areas they're in. I'm not sure if this is a bug or anything, but the other 2 types, and especially the walking sentinel, should also be roaming randomly on the planet. That is something that we saw in the trailers, and I'm not sure if it's some kind of technical limitation. I'm not sure if it caused too many bugs for Hello Games to implement yet, but I think that should also make it in next. It shouldn't be that hard to make. I mean, we already have mods that pretty much deal with this 100%, and it doesn't really cause that many issues. Roaming sentinels should definitely be in the game, especially the tall looking ones, as they are so freaking cinematic. It was also shown at E3 to be an occurrence, and players were told that they would be able to randomly stumble upon these machines of war. Currently, the only way to encounter the second and third tier of sentinels is by actively fighting the smaller ones and waiting for them to alert the bigger guys. Hopefully next will fix this, at least in part. Speaking of E3 promises, there is also the subject of warring factions. I think it was back in 2015 when Sean talked about factions being able to wage war upon one another and players being able to join sides. So far I have yet to see that happening. At most, players get small scale battles with some freighters involved, and the only sides you're ever going to pick is by farming reputation with the 3 main alien species. There's no war going on, even though there is a section in the Galactic view about conflict levels. I'd love to see the conflict levels being representative of what's happening inside a particular solar system. If one system reads as being at war, for example, I would love to be able to get in it and witness a full on-scale war with the factions over there and be able to actually pick sides. And since we're on the subject of picking sides, I would also love the reputation system to have more meaning. For example, if I choose to side with the Gex for some reason, I would immediately be at war with whatever faction they are at war with. So if I were to go into a Corvex system, I would be on a bounty list and get attacked. You know, just have those interactions that are supposed to be there. It doesn't make any sense that you can be friends with literally everybody, help them out in whatever they're doing, but that doesn't affect your standing with the other ones. So it would make sense that if you're choosing a side, the other one would be in conflict with you as well. Even the lore itself points out to heinous crimes made by certain factions against the others, yet most aliens out there prefer to just sit on their butts all day long browsing on their tablets, not really minding the war or anything. So this would really make things so much better from this perspective. Planetary rotation is another big one on the list. Even though this feature was never actually showcased, it was mentioned back before the game was released. Unfortunately, this didn't make it into the final product. I'm sure there's a severe technical limitation that prevents us from having it now. So far, while you can indeed travel everywhere, the solar system is nothing more than a box screen, so a glorified loading screen, so to say. You can't really go to a star since it's just a drawing in the distance, a point of light or a source of light. The planets are rather static, and only when landing will you ever see night cycles or day and night cycles. I hope there's a plans to fix this. I'm not expecting this to come anytime soon. I know it's a huge deal, it was never showcased, but it is something that in the game such as this should be there, so hopefully we'll get a huge update for all of this. Number 5 on the list is VR support. This feature I see being requested more often lately. A lot of folks out there are speculating that the next update for No Man's Sky will also bring VR support, but honestly I doubt it. I mean, we are already getting a port to the Xbox One, so I don't think they even had the time to also make a viable version of the game on any of the VR devices, but I really hope for that in the near future. I think this game has a huge potential on VR. It would be definitely very immersive, it would be very fun. The controls themselves aren't really that complicated, it's not like there's any advanced mechanics in this game, so it will definitely go very well with the VR. It just needs time and I hope it's gonna be there really soon, but I wouldn't hold my breath for next to have something like this to support this. Even if it did, it would most probably be mentioned by Hello Games, but yeah, I hope at some point this will make it into the game. Next on the list is diverse biomes. Up until now, biome generation got improved by a lot, that is true, but currently it's only restricted to one biome type per planet. This doesn't really make any sense from a scientific point of view. If the planet type is like Earth, for example, it should have a varying number of environments, from icy poles to tropical regions and even deserts. That is something that I haven't seen yet in No Man's Sky. Even though there is some terrain variation, it's just one single one and it makes things a little bit too static and boring for the most part. There should also be a varying degree of natural activity, even of the extreme type. I would love to walk on a planet and encounter various weathers depending on where I am on that planet, like a wild rain in the tropical area, or a stormy blizzard if I go into the North Pole, or even sandstorms if it has a desert. There's also the question of catastrophic events such as earthquakes or volcano eruptions. I would love to see them added in No Man's Sky and make planets much more dangerous than they are. Heck, even have asteroid impacts in the game. They really make sense. There's plenty of asteroids out there in outer space, so what if a few of them happen to drop on a planet? That would make sense. It would look really freaking cool, and I would definitely love to have that occurrence in No Man's Sky right now. And it would make up for a better adventure knowing that the planet you're on isn't a copy-paste of the same environment over and over again. Number 7 is Space Whale, and since we're speaking of catastrophic encounters, this subject of space whales comes up over and over again. I've tested a mod trying to emulate this feature, you probably saw it in my previous videos, and while it's still bare bones, even in this state it amazes me how good it can look. I will admit that this was never actually a promised feature, and Sean only briefly talked about it as being a fiction that he's really into. The vastness of space often more than not becomes boring and nothing more than a tedious ride until your next point of interest, so why not just spice things up when you're traveling from one planet to another? I believe this is a missed opportunity, honestly, a void that could easily be filled with a massive deep space horror. I would even be content with having it much like how the mod does it, but just have a little bit better animations. That would be enough for me, as I would just love to see something like that in outer space, being randomly there, whatever it is doing, I don't really care, I just want to see it in the game. Number 8 is procedural generation getting more wild as you get closer to the center. Before the No Man's Sky was released, a big talking point was the importance of traveling to the center of the galaxy and how weirder things get as you get closer to it. Suffice to say that this was never the case, and the random procedural generation was, well, it was just that, it was random, and it still is. So far, going to the center of the galaxy is the least interesting thing you can do in No Man's Sky. There's nothing there for you awaiting except for a few systems claimed by somebody. In fact, there's more interesting stuff almost a million light years away from it in the Galactic Hub if you want to see something cool. I hope Hello Games manages to make it so that procedural generation gets even more wilder the closer you get to the core, have more conflict happening, an increased sentinel presence, more wild looking creatures and worlds. That was something that was promised. I know Hello Games are still trying to flesh out the random generation, but this feature was something that I really hoped for before the game was released. So unfortunate that we didn't see it yet. Number 9 is stellar classification. I've talked previously about stars and how they are nothing more than a point of light in the distance and how you can't really interact with them and that you are somehow never able to reach. I know it was promised that they would actually be physical objects in the universe. That never turned out to be that way. It will also make sense for stars to be at various stages in their lifespans, or just for them being in different sizes and colors. I mean, the galactic view already has 4 classifications. We have yellow stars, we have red, blue, green, but you never see that color distinction when you get inside of that particular system. I would love to have a neutron star or a pulsar for that matter, maybe a supernova. As pointed out, stars at different stages would also be lovely. A few days ago I saw another space game having a pulsar and the player was able to get to it. There wasn't much interaction out there except for the fact that it destroyed its ship, but it was really freaking awesome, and No Man's Sky would definitely benefit from something like this. And this brings us to the final point, something that was recently discovered to be possible but with a twist. So we know that there are 255 galaxies in the game, all named differently and with their own unique characteristics, but what if you want to go back into the galaxy that you were previously into, just can't make it there anymore? A major concern I see being posted often is how players cannot go back into the previous galaxy they have been into, especially Euclid, after choosing to move into the next. Suffice to say that the vast majority of players are still in Euclid, hence why people regret ever moving away from it. There's only 2 possible ways to ever go back to Euclid. One of them implies you having a backup copy of your save game when you were there, and the second one requires you to travel throughout all of the 255 galaxies up until next one to get back. So if you are in the last galaxy, if you go to the center of it, you will be warped directly into the first one, which is Euclid. That is extremely tedious, time consuming. I don't even want to begin to think how much time that even needs, and I'm pretty sure it involves quite a lot of cheating. So I really hope Hello Games gives us a way to go back in the previous galaxy, or just make intergalactic travel possible. Maybe even have them visually separated inside the galactic view if you zoom out enough. Like for example, if you're in Euclid, you can zoom out of it and check out whichever other galaxy is around it. That would make so much more sense. And this concludes today's list with 10 more things players are dying to see in No Man's Sky. Are there any features I have missed? Comment down below. Did I miss something? Did you find other promised features that were never delivered? As always, don't forget to also give a thumbs up to the video if you enjoyed it. Also subscribe to the channel and activate that notification bell, and I will see you guys next time.